Jimmy Hart never shut up, but there were a few guys who almost made him wish he had. Behind the sunglasses, the leopard print jackets, and that megaphone screaming like a televangelist in heat, Jimmy was a pro's pro. He managed some of the most volatile freaks in wrestling history and came out smiling, but even the mouth of the South had his limits. While most of the boys in the back respected Jimmy, a rare few made him clench his teeth so hard it probably changed his jawline. We're not talking about storyline rivals or playful ribbing. We're talking real heat, shoot beef, the kind where he wouldn't piss on you if your tassels were on fire. This is the short list, the few wrestlers Jimmy Hart hated working with. For every legend he elevated, there were a couple of ticking time bombs in sequence that had him wishing he'd just stuck to managing local garage bands. From backstage betrayals to ego explosions, these are the dudes who turned Jimmy's famous "yeah, baby" into "get me the hell out of here." When you think Jimmy Hart, you picture sequins, megaphones, and managing wild men who could break a skull with a glare. But even the mouth of the South had his limits, and one of those limits was Bill Goldberg. The Beast from Georgia was the ultimate wrecking ball, but not in a good way for Jimmy's tastes. Hart's beef with Goldberg was never on TV or part of some scripted rivalry. No, this was pure backstage reality. In multiple shoot interviews and wrestling podcasts, Jimmy called Goldberg unsafe, claiming his reckless style cut careers short and made life miserable for everyone around him. Hart didn't mince words. As he put it, Goldberg was like a bull in a china shop who didn't care if he smashed his own hand. This wasn't just wrestler gripe. Folks like Arn Anderson and other vets confirmed Goldberg's short temper and wild style made him a liability in the ring. For Jimmy, who prided himself on precision and storytelling, dealing with Goldberg's bullheadedness was like trying to conduct an orchestra where the drummer is swinging a sledgehammer. Hart once said, "Goldberg's moves looked good on TV, but the way he hit people backstage, man, I wouldn't want to be in that ring with him. He wasn't thinking about anyone else but himself." This safety issue wasn't just talk. It reportedly caused real injuries and shortened runs for several guys, grinding down trust backstage. Goldberg turned ring nights into career flight risks. Working with him was less hit the ropes and more brace for impact. Goldberg may be a legend to fans, but to Jimmy Hart, he was the guy you hoped didn't show up on your card. Because his wild style wasn't just dangerous for opponents, it was a liability for the whole locker room. Working with Eric Bischoff wasn't just clashing personalities, it was like watching two nuclear reactors melt into one another and hoping the Earth survives. When Hart joined WCW, Bischoff was calling all the shots. Creative control, TV time, contracts. Hell, even who got to use Hart's megaphone. Hart didn't hold back in shoot interviews. He called Bischoff a total complete idiot, maybe the single stupidest idiot that ever got into wrestling. That wasn't backstage boasting, it was a decommissioned fuse blowing in front of everyone. Why the rage? Hart saw Bischoff drowning WCW's potential by stacking it with corporate nonsense. Pointless licensing deals, weak merch, half-assed video productions, like renaming Disco Inferno Disco Fever. It choked the creative pipe Hart knew how to work. They clashed over control and vision. Hart said Bischoff got too big for his suit, dragged both on air and off into stale creative decisions. When Brian Knobbs nearly assaulted Bischoff over cheap production gear, Hart was the one who stepped in, on camera and off, to defuse the situation. This wasn't a manager-wrestler spat. It was creative smackdown, Hart versus the system Bischoff built, and Hart publicly called him out. That kind of hate doesn't hide in hotel corridors. It detonates in podcast studios and news reports. Bottom line, if wrestling had a nuclear meltdown, it'd be two creative bomb shelters struggling to outshine each other, and Hart would still be throwing his megaphone at Bischoff's self-aggrandized legacy. You ever meet someone so professionally useless it's like they're actively trying to sabotage their own career? That's Honky Tonk Man in a nutshell, and Jimmy Hart's longest-running headache. Managing Honky was like trying to herd drunk cats, with the cats being on fire and also armed. Hart didn't just dislike Honky, he loathed him, and for good reason. First off, Honky Tonk Man was the wrestling version of a dead battery. No energy, no drive, and an ego so fragile it could shatter if someone asked him to tie his own damn boots. Hart said in shoot interviews that Honky was the most difficult man I ever managed. That's not the "I don't like this guy" wrestling nonsense. That's "I want to throttle you with my own hands" real talk. Picture this. You're Jimmy Hart, a guy who built his career managing talents like Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, fighters who brought heat, drama, and passion. Then you get stuck with Honky, who treats every show like a damn cocktail party. He'd show up late, forget his lines, and then complain like he's auditioning for a Lifetime movie about how wrestling is just too hard for him. Managing Honky was like babysitting a rock with a guitar. Backstage, Honky's reputation was poison. Wrestlers and crew avoided him because he was a walking time bomb of attitude and laziness. The guy refused to take responsibility for anything. Miss a cue? Not his fault. Screw up a promo? The writers hate him. Lose a match? The ref's blind. It was always someone else's fault, never his. Hart said the dude couldn't be trusted to do the job. And then there was the in-ring work. Honky was a mid-carder with zero presence or intensity. Watching him wrestle was like watching paint dry. If the paint was also asking for a coffee break every 2 minutes. Hart wanted a star, but all he got was a dead weight dragging the act down like a bad smell you can't scrub out. Jimmy even said he wanted to slap the guy to get his attention, and that's coming from a guy who's been in the business for decades and rarely loses his temper. When you hear Hart talk about Honky, it's clear the frustration was real, deep, and probably burned through a few cases of aspirin. So yeah, Honky Tonk Man was the ultimate professional liability. Lazy, selfish, and completely unreliable. Jimmy Hart didn't just dislike managing him, he regretted it. The guy was a poison pill wrapped in a rhinestone-studded jacket. If wrestling had a hall of shame for talent you'd pay to never work with again, Honky would be the poster child. And Jimmy Hart's behind-the-scenes horror stories prove it. Managing Honky was a masterclass in patience, disappointment, and wasted potential. Jimmy Hart didn't just carry a megaphone, he carried every wrestler's emotional baggage like a divorced mom trying to keep a family barbecue civil. For decades, he screamed, strutted, and sold other people's chaos, while quietly swallowing the kind of stress that turns your hair gray and your soul to dust. He wasn't just a manager, he was a diplomat in sequence, forced to smile through locker room tantrums, bloated egos, broken promises, and enough passive-aggressive promo bullshit to fuel a Real Housewives reunion. And what did he get in return? Backhanded compliments, ungrateful talent, and late-night voicemails about who refused to job to who. Jimmy Hart was a hype man for people who didn't deserve hype, a cleanup crew for wrestling's worst personalities, the guy who could cut a promo while calculating how many beers it would take to forget the last one. For all the glitter, neon jackets, and shrieking promos, Jimmy Hart's career wasn't a party. It was a damn hostage situation with egos. This was a guy who gave his entire life to the business and spent it managing guys who treated him like a sentient microphone stand. His patience wasn't just tested, it was waterboarded. If you asked Jimmy how he stayed so chipper, he'd probably say therapy, liquor, and knowing how to duck flying guitars. The man didn't manage talent, he managed chaos and spandex. But here's the cruel irony. Jimmy Hart was good at this, too good. So good, in fact, that promoters kept pairing him with the worst human jalapenos in the locker room. Why? Because he could sell anything. He could sell dog food in a perfume shop. And yet, every time he put his back into building a career, someone else was busy setting it on fire with a gas can and a promo full of nonsense. The man deserved peace, applause, and maybe a vacation with no wrestlers in sight. Instead, he got migraines and pink zebra pants. Well, that's it for today, folks. Smash that subscribe like Jimmy Hart, smash decades of backstage egos, with a smile, a shriek, and zero patience left. And hit the like button if you've ever wanted to throw a megaphone at a coworker. Thanks for watching.